Well, hello, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be with you virtually. And today I have the distinct pleasure of interviewing Scott Solombrino, the President and Executive Director of the Global Business Travel Association. I've known Scott for a very long period of time, and he's going to share with us today some of the insights that are going on more broadly, COVID-19 today, COVID-19 future, and giving us an update in terms of what we can expect to see in the near future. So Scott, I was wondering if you could maybe just start and give us the vision of what GBTA is seeing in North America, and perhaps also give us some insights separately for Canada and the US, because we have hoteliers that are from both of those constituencies.
So every 10 days, GBTA publishes a study, a survey that goes out. The last survey had 1,600 corporations respond to it. It's been going on since the first week in February. And obviously, we watched all of this go to zero over a period of weeks, which was tragic. But in our last survey, in the last 5 days, we have seen some green shoots starting to come out of the ground. It started in Asia, where we started to see people beginning to take some trips back into China, back into Seoul, back into Tokyo, and into Singapore. And it's just starting at the small level, but it's much improved where it was a week prior to that. So we think that things are starting to happen in parts of the world where the virus first began. We're also starting to see some new activity in the US market in particular. And it's slow, it's drive-in type of business. I'm talking to lots of people, and they're all telling me the same thing, that the hotels are usually open and people are driving to them and they're taking small trips. I'm also encouraged by my airline partners, because I've been doing CEOs interviews for weeks, and they're telling me that they're seeing some shock trips that are beginning to happen where people want to get away and they might go off to a resort, and they're not running, more than 20 or 30% occupancy yet, but they're starting to see some consistent patterns where people are saying, I can do this and I'm going to take a trip. So for me, it's improved from where it was where we were in March, and certainly April was brutal. So I'm starting to feel like the industry is slowly starting to come out of this slumber, and that we're heading in the right direction for the first time in the last 90 days.
Well, that's very encouraging to hear, and I know our audience will be ready to hear that. You did give us some insight into APAC, but can you give us a quick update in terms of EMEA, in terms of both travel within Europe as well as potential travel outbound from Europe?
EMEA is going to be a bigger problem in a longer recovery. Every day at 5 a.m. East Coast time, I'm on with my lobbying team in Europe. And the problem in Europe, there's not one central government on recovery. Each country has different regulations, different rules. In Italy, if you leave the country, you come back, it's 28 days in quarantine, which is outrageous. Why would you take a business trip if you knew you were going to come home and be off work for another month? You wouldn't do it. So there's an inconsistent pattern there. We, as the travel industry, are now heavily lobbying the EU countries and saying, look, all 27 countries have to get together here. And you have to have some consistency in your pattern of rules. If the flying public is not convinced that they can take a trip and not get caught up in a bureaucratic or a health nightmare, they won't do it. They have to know, what are the rules, what do I have to be worried about, and how do I execute my business trip without having a complete disruption to my life? So in the EU, they're starting to realize it. There was a minister of transport who gave a speech last week, and she quoted a bunch of lines I had written to her in a letter, because I got a hold of the video. And she literally quoted the lines and said, there'll be no recovery in Europe without the global travel community being the first to be the recovery. So they're realizing the importance of travel. Now, there is some travel going on locally, because people can take a train, they can do a local trip. But in the EU, they depend on lots of international people coming in from both a tourism, a leisure, and a business side. So they have to kind of even out the lumpiness of what those regulations are. And I think it's just going to be longer, because they had a much deeper health crisis in Europe. They had health systems that were really not doing well, and they're just getting those resolved. I mean, there's over 30,000 people dead in Spain, France, and Italy, and the numbers are staggering for these countries. But now it finally seems to have reached an apex, and we're starting to feel like it's slowly coming together. But the US was really the leader on government intervention. We've never seen this country respond financially as quick as it did with the emergency aid that they took. and we're up to $7 trillion between the Federal Reserve and in the direct spend. That, I think, is the difference of why the U.S. is going to recover much faster than EMEA is. I think it's going to be a slower roll there.
Well, thank you for that. I know our hoteliers in Europe will be somewhat disappointed, but I know they're living it day by day themselves and seeing how it is unfolding in each one of their territories. I'd like to move on and talk very specifically about the RFP decision and the great advocacy work that you did, Scott, on behalf of the supplier community. I know this was unprecedented for GBTA to take a position on the RFP process this year, but I'm hopeful that you can maybe give the audience some insights in terms of the work that GBTA did and some of the background around the why of you taking on this initiative.
So I was contacted in the beginning of March by buyers in the buyer community saying, hey, this is turning out to be a global disaster and things are changing rapidly. Our hotel partners are being forced to furlough people, lay people off. Hotels are closing. How are we going to get through an RFP season? And we basically started to call around and start speaking to the hotels, and they said, we've been devastated. We don't have people in these properties that would normally do this work. We don't know how we'll ever deal with it and how we're going to manage it. So there was a movement amongst the buyer community. Those are the customers. And they basically said, how can we help build a bridge to our partners that we depend on every single day? We had buyers saying that they were prepaying a year in advance for certain hotel properties that supported their businesses so critically, and their biggest worry was they might not come back and be in business. And we were hearing that from huge companies. So I said, we need to get together. Let's talk to all of our committees. We have lots of committees at GBTA. Let's talk to all of the accommodations people in Europe. Let's bring everybody together. Let's talk to our boards of directors. Let's talk to all the stakeholders and see if there's a way we could get about 50 brand hotels globally across the world to agree to roll the rates into 2021 without being changed. And as this project took on a life of its own, the easiest part of the project was the call I had to do with all 50 brands on the call. They immediately, with the big companies first yelling, we support this 100%, and then everybody went down from there, and everybody was basically on the same page saying, this is what we're gonna have to do to survive. This will be a great help as our partners from our buyer community. Thank you for taking this on, and we know you're gonna get some grief for it because it's not what GBTA would normally do. Normally, we would mediate the situation, and we would do a study, some research projects, and work with our committees. In this case, we were making a hard recommendation saying, because of the extraordinary nature of a pandemic that we've never experienced before, we think this is a special circumstance. We're asking everybody to get on the same page and to forego the RFP. And then we did our press release and made our announcement. And we've had very little pushback. There's been a little bit of pushback in some of the trade press from some of the consulting groups, but you have to respect that because they're the people that make a living on doing RFPs. So, I understand where they're coming from, but the buyer community has been staunchly together on this, saying, whatever we have to do to help the hotels restart, get their businesses back online, get their people back to work, we have to support that, because without any hotels to go to, we're not going to have a travel program. The other thing that was interesting was we basically said, if there's an RFP and none of the major hotel companies respond, you no longer have a managed program. You'll have an unmanaged program, and what's that going to do to the buyer community? Because hotels could easily say, we don't care, we're not responding to your RFP, and let the pricing go where it goes. So we had to get everybody on the same page and agree this was the right decision. Remember, the hotels view this as you have to guarantee room nights in volume to get a discount. The buyers look at it, well, I'm going to give you some volume, I want the discount. But what happens when the buyers can't make the volume? They would lose the discount. Well, by rolling the rates, the buyers, I think, came out in a much better place, and they know that. And they got to support their partners. The hotel industry is now in a recovery phase. And anything that we can do at GBTA to guarantee that both buyers and suppliers are going to survive this pandemic, we will take the risk and try to do. And we did it.
Well, on behalf of Best Western, Scott, and World Hotels, I'd like to thank you for that, because I do think this nature of collaboration between the supply and buyer community is going to be really critical, because this is a very, very difficult time. And I think the word survival is one that we all have to think about very carefully, because it is very difficult times. There are still very difficult times again ahead of us. And we've got to be very thoughtful and very pragmatic in terms of how do we approach keeping this industry alive and returning it to a state of prosperity. So we really thank GBTA for taking that leadership, because you were the bridge that allowed, which GBTA often does, the dialogue, an effective dialogue between the buyers and the suppliers to really get us to the right kind of business outcomes. I'd like to ask you two more questions if I can. One is really around this ambiguous situation that we live in and this uncertainty. Because for me, it's a double-edged sword. There's goodness and badness, because I do fundamentally believe that ambiguity and uncertainty is one of those clear defining characteristics of true leaders in terms of being able to live in situations where there isn't a clear path forward. So I often think about you, Scott, because you've assumed a new role. You have been with the organization for just a year now, and you have been faced with unprecedented challenges in terms of assuming this new role. And there's a lot of uncertainty that you are dealing with. And I'm just wondering, in terms of, again, what would you bring to this audience in terms of the kinds of learnings that you've had in terms of dealing with ambiguity? How do they learn how to deal with ambiguity? Because it's very difficult right now, because none of the existing playbooks may apply, and we're all trying to figure it out together. So what would you offer to our hoteliers?
You're all leaders in your space. If you're running a hotel, own a hotel, you're a sales leader, manager, it doesn't matter. You're a leader. And in leadership, you have to make decisions quickly. You can't overthink them, and you're going to make some decisions that might not work out for you. But you have to lead. I got to GBTA a year ago. No one ever thought I'd be facing a pandemic. So I made a decision pretty quickly in February at our board meeting, and Dorothy, you were at that meeting because it was at your headquarters in Phoenix. And I said to the board, I'm doing X, Y, and Z. And people looked at me like I was crazy. They're like, there's nothing really going on here. This is not, you're being dramatic. And I'm like, oh no, this is what we're going to be faced with, and here's what I'm going to do. You have to make that leap to say, you can either watch other people lead, and God knows where they're going to lead you to, or you can take the risk and lead yourself and hope that you're on the finer pathway to make sure you're going to get a better result. So I would say to everybody, no matter what your role is within the company, be a leader, take some risk, do what you think is best and right for the organization, and keep moving forward. And don't second guess the bad decisions, because no one's perfect, and you have to keep leading. That's where the ambiguity comes in. You could overthink this, and by the time you're done overthinking it, the crisis has passed and you missed the opportunity to help really lead the organization in the direction it had to go in. So you're going to make some mistakes, but keep moving forward. Don't overthink it, and keep doing things that you feel through your training and through your years of experience are the right decisions in the best interest of your organization. That's what leadership is. I tell people sometimes, and I have a lot of friends in London who I'm talking to on a regular basis in the industry. I say, my fate is that of Winston Churchill. Not that I'm comparing myself to Winston Churchill. He won the war, saved the world, and then they fired him. So sooner or later, they'll get to me too, but that's okay, because I was able to lead through a difficult period of time, and hopefully everyone will remember that you made the tough decisions and you moved the organization through a very difficult period of time. They'll give you accolades when it's over. Basically, that's how it ends. And that's okay, as long as you can accept your fate.
I love that analogy, Scott. I'm one of those fear-based persons too that always thinks of the worst case scenario. So I share that kind of thinking. I would like to close because there's a few thoughts that I have, but I do think in these very difficult times that we all look for inspiration to give us a lift through the weeks, the days. We all have good and bad days. I am constantly inspired by the hoteliers that I get to connect with every day in terms of how stoically they are approaching the challenges of this pandemic, how they are looking towards their future in terms of really what do they need to do to survive, how do they really help their teams and their families get through this crisis. So I have the great privilege of speaking with many of them on a daily basis, and they continue to inspire me with their courage. What inspires you? How do you keep yourself going through all of these difficult times?
I will have interviewed 50 of the biggest CEOs, including my dear friend David Kong in this industry, before my forum series ends. No one has denied me an interview. Everybody has found time to come on. These are people running huge public companies with better things to do than hang around with me, but they've come on. I'll tell you what inspires me is the unity amongst every one of them. The buyers, the suppliers, everybody, airline, hotel, rent-a-car, everybody is pulling for the same thing, is for everybody in travel to get back to a sense of normalcy with minimal amounts of damage to the system. And everybody wants everybody back to work and back to doing what we all love more than anything, which is the hospitality travel industry. That's inspiring me because I'm seeing people who I know have never really gotten along well, working together in associations, working together on committees, try to find solutions. It's been an inspiration to see that it took a pandemic to unite an entire sector together. Now, travel's always been very good to each other because we're in the hospitality business. We generally like taking care of people. This is different. I have never seen people more unified for the same outcome. That to me has changed the way I look at the world. And I can't wait to get up every morning at 5 a.m. and get on my first call to my European lobbying team to hear about all the things I got to get done in Europe in the morning, because I know they're all trying to get to the same goal, and that is to bring business back. And it doesn't stop until 11:30 at night for me. And I'm happy that I'm doing it because I can never forget this period of time when everybody really was pulling for the same outcome. That to me is an amazing inspiration, and I hope it continues after the pandemic is gone, because think of how much success we'd all have if we all got along forever. So I'm hopeful that humanity has changed by this because it was a virus. It wasn't something that man did to man. This is something that nature did, and I think people realize how vulnerable we all are and why we have to be together to find a solution. So I pray every day that science fixes it because it's a scientific problem. The unity will be something I'll never forget.
Scott, that was a brilliant close, and I thank you for everything that you do for the industry and in particular for Best Western. You talked about relationships earlier. You made a tremendous investment by speaking at our convention last year, and I really appreciate you taking some time today to inspire us about our future, give us a sense of the business travel community and that it is going to return. And lastly, that the unity of our industry, because I, like you, fundamentally believe that the level of collaboration has been incredible. And it's something that I do hope continues much beyond the pandemic, because I always believe when you're in it together, you can accomplish unparalleled things. So thank you for all that you do for us. Congratulations on all of the great successes that you continue to have at GBTA. And we appreciate you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very, very much, and keep hope going. Thank you.
Thank you.